All right, well, we'll get started since this is going to be recorded anyway. And we can do it very interactive like and very QA based if you would like. So, anybody who's here, if you have any questions whatsoever, stop me and I will take a minute to talk about whatever your question is. And then at the end, we can do a little bit of Q&A. I watched a recorded version of this talk yesterday at Texas Cyber, and it took about 20 minutes. So, after that, we can just do a little bit of Q&A. You can ask me anything if you'd like. So, this talk is about trying to jumpstart your opportunities in penetration testing or security by finding CVEs and hacking the hiring process by pen testing free and open source applications. If you don't know, I am Joe Helly. I'm a senior penetration tester at TCM Security. And like many of you, I'm a veteran. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan in the Army. I'm the mayor, if you didn't know, and that's because I was an elected mayor once. I hold 3 individual CVEs, and I have 2 CVEs with the cyber mentor that we found one night on one of his streams that he was doing. Hold a whole bunch of certifications because I'm a WGU grad, as well as just kind of certification hawk. Huge advocate for changing entry-level processes into cybersecurity careers. I don't think that you should have to go up the traditional totem pole to excel and succeed in this industry, and I think it's a huge disservice to our industry as a whole to expect that you need to kind of grind away at what is going on here. Timings are turned on for some reason. Apologize for that. So I really don't think that that's a requirement, and I think that we need to find ways to break down some of those walls and make the field more accessible so that we can kind of address this talent pool versus huge surplus of jobs. My first professional IT job was in penetration testing, just so folks know that it is possible. I created the Movement, Pivoting, and Persistence course. I'm not sure if we have any of the folks who attended the workshop the other day here, but if you did, thank you for being at that. And I used to make booze. I was a moonshiner. I owned a little craft distillery once upon a time. We're here again because, again, hiring in offensive security positions is broken, as well as defensive security positions. You need that experience to get the job, but you need a job to get the experience. It's kind of this perpetuating circle of death. Bug bounty hunting has become quite saturated worldwide. Where we're talking about millions of people being able to jump on these platforms and essentially just hunt the same things over and over. And if you're not able to get into some of these private invite-only programs, you really are against the current. Additionally, certificate values diminish as more people obtain the same certifications. Looking at things like the OSCP, there was a time and place where that certification set you apart from your peers. That's not necessarily the case anymore, and we do see that oftentimes we're having people who have OSCP or other big ticket certifications, GPEN, etc., trying to get jobs, but it doesn't set you apart with your peers because your peers are having these same certifications now too. And that again causes candidates to struggle to set themselves apart. And few organizations speak the same language when it comes to quantifiable experience. And that's even more difficult with us veterans, right? We have issues with skills and abilities translation when we exit the service. And we face that out here in this world, whether you've been in the military or not. But one thing that really does stand out in security fields and in IT security and cybersecurity is the value of CVEs. And a CVE is abbreviated for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. It's a database maintained by MITRE, and it's a repository of publicly disclosed vulnerabilities worldwide. A publicly disclosed CVE through MITRE is a first-time disclosure of a zero-day vulnerability finding, and many professionals in the field will go their entire careers without ever finding one of these, and others may find several over the same amount of time. This timing thing, I don't know why it's doing this. Some CVE findings affect security on a global scale. We're talking about things like zero logon, the SolarWinds hack, etc. Other findings may affect small applications created and maintained by small brick-and-mortar companies and are free and open source. You might find them on GitHub. You might find them on SourceForge. My first CVE, I've got to address this. Anybody know how do you stop timings? Okay, I think I got it. Sorry. First CVE came against a real world, a large scale communication tool with Mitel. And it was in my first month as a penetration tester, simply on a web app pen test. I was just testing something, and I threw burp at it, and it came back with a cross-site scripting vulnerability that I had to dig into a bit. And it ended up being on a mouse over on a drop-down box on one of the very specific links in that drop-down. So you really don't know when or if you'll ever find one, but there are ways to go find them if you really want to. Um, and that's kind of where we're at here today with this talk. CVE size doesn't necessarily matter when you're trying to leverage it on your resume and for job prospects. Finding a zero-day vulnerability means that you've reported to MITRE or to a CNA, which we'll touch on here after a while. It shows a person's initiative, your ability to research, create proofs of concept, write technically, and manage client communications and expectations. Just like on a penetration test, when you find a CVE and you want to report it, you're going through much of the same process as you would on a regular penetration test. So why are we doing this, and what's this all about today? And it's really born from a boring Sunday night I was having. I was just kind of sitting around. I didn't have much to do, and I mentor a lot of folks on my Discord server, through Twitter, through LinkedIn. I've done, do a decent amount of one-on-ones with people, and I mentor people who are struggling to find work in the field. They really, really want to work in IT security and cybersecurity. They want to work to improve, our IT infrastructures, but they struggle to find work, again, for many of those reasons we talked about a few minutes ago. Not being able to set yourself apart, credentialing, value diminishment, and et cetera. And this means that I struggle as well, because I do want to help other people, but acknowledge and identify that this hiring process is such a challenge. So just leveraging that boredom and knowledge, I decided to just kind of test the theory that earning CVEs will maybe help people find gainful employment. I don't have a whole lot of research on this here, but I do have some Discord and Twitter things later on that we can talk about, just kind of to show a little bit of proof. But so for me to do this, I had to find potential exploitable targets, and thinking about, again, where CVEs are. Sometimes these are really large global scale vulnerabilities. Other times it's a simple cross-site scripting vulnerability you find in maybe a WordPress library or an application you were able to search out and find on GitHub. So considering application scale and the amount of time I was giving myself, which was literally a Sunday evening, I decided to look at free and open source projects that were likely to not have much security support. When you think about larger products, thinking SolarWinds, thinking Cisco, thinking Windows, or Microsoft and Windows, etc., or WordPress and the like, these are large products used worldwide. They have significant security apparatus in place, meaning that they're being tested constantly, and they're also being updated and improved constantly. So in my time frame, I had to find something that was going to be realistic for my goal. And so smaller, less used, but still maintained products likely were not going to have these same security measures in place. So doing this itself served a dual purpose, right? I was able to increase my chances of finding a zero-day vulnerability, but also the opportunity to maybe help a smaller organization secure one of their applications. And to me, that's one of the biggest values here when we look at the scale of what we're doing. It's not only about getting the job, it's about creating a more secure IT infrastructure, and being able to help somebody who really doesn't have the resources to help themselves is huge to me. So trying to find potential exploitable targets, you got to use a little bit of Google foo here, and targeting common industries and thinking about what are some of the things that are likely to have internally developed or small scale individual or independent developers creating applications for. And thinking about schools, hospitals, hotels, maybe small city applications that are free and open source, et cetera, prove to be successful. So here you can see a Google search for hotel CMS FOSS. These are the kind of searches that for me worked out really well. And for folks who have kind of followed these footsteps that I've been using, these kind of search parameters have worked well for them as well. So the hotel CMS FOSS search landed multiple results. If you do this today, you'll probably find a lot of results, but you're going to find a whole lot of people who have been testing these things. So get creative with what you're looking for, right? It doesn't just have to be hotel CMS FOSS. It could be clothing store CMS. It could be number of things. Just use a lot of creativity and imagination. The next challenge was parsing which applications were really free and open source and not just paywall applications hiding behind marketing on websites, right? You go to a website that says, sure, it's free and open source, but then you have to input your name and your email and your address, and they want to send you information and they want to talk to you and they want to try to upsell you. So I was trying to avoid that, because of the time management issue. So websites that really provided some results were SourceForge and GitHub. And then the biggest challenge I had was actually installing applications to test. I'm not a web developer. I've had minimal web development experience beyond some Udemy courses. I've never been a network administrator or a systems administrator. So trying to spin up full scale, production, a web application environment was somewhat challenging to me. And if you have the same experience as I do, it could be very challenging for you as well. And then finally, I chose the application Hotel Druid because it was pretty simple to install. Kudos to the developer. It uses low overhead. I was able to run it off a PHP development server. I was able to use SQL Lite versus having to spin up like a whole MySQL database. So I was able to really test this on a budget and incredibly quick. So just a quick note before we get too much farther. Downloadable applications are generally safe to test, meaning you don't need permission to do so on your own machine. Some applications might have licensing agreements, and you have to check with your country's laws that may provide for criminal and civil liabilities if testing is conducted. So make sure that you read all the fine print. FOSS applications generally do not have these stipulations. If you go on GitHub and you're seeing, like the MIT license or the Apache license or whatever those licenses are on GitHub, this is likely saying that you can use this application as you wish. If you modify it for your own use, you need to attribute to the original creator, etc. But you should have clear usage to do this. Even if you are in the clear, please know that not all developers are super excited or happy that somebody is testing and exploiting their applications. Some people truly do take these things very, very personal because they spend a whole lot of time on it, and it's a product of their labor. They work really hard. But oftentimes they're not being trained out of school or with whatever resources they're using to understand security implications. So they might take it personal. If you send them a pull request or an email, et cetera, and letting them know that I broke your application. So you're going to have to use a little bit of verbal foo or verbal judo, excuse me, or email judo to play a bit of politics to try to smooth things over. So just be aware that you may not always get a warm reception if you find SQL injection or anything. But continuing on from there now, the exploitation itself was by far the easiest part of this process for me. Good testing methodology matters here. If you have never done pen testing before or you're interested in it, the Practical Ethical Hacking course from the Cyber Mentor, really good course, really hit the ground running. You would be good to start doing something like this. Alternatively, if you like other platforms like INE, or you want to try to earn a certification, the penetration testing student from INE with the EJPT certification at the end would also help you with your methodology and set you up here. Try HackMe, has learning paths. Hack the Box to a lesser extent has learning paths as well. So you want to go into this process understanding good methodology to do this testing. We can also throw in the mayor.tech. Let's do that. But yes, Jax, thank you so much for sharing those. The cybermentor.com, tryhackme.com. We have academy.tcmsec.com, which is where my course is as well. And that's where you can get the Practical Ethical Hacking course and some other resources. So millions of resources. If you have found something that works for you in the chat, go ahead and share those as well. I think it's really good. TryHackMe just came out with the new junior penetration test learning path. Absolutely. And I think that it's a heck of a resource, by far. And it's resources created by the community for the community, which to me shows a lot of not only initiative, but also value and worth, because these are people who have cut their teeth doing some of these things. And the resources you're getting back are typically real world resources, advice, expertise, and opinions. So it's like crowdsourced education, which I think is huge. And one other thing here, since we're on the topic of education, diversify your education. Um, the PH covers a lot of good stuff. My MP&P course covers a lot of good stuff. EJPT or the PTS course covers a lot of good stuff. But if you rely on one resource, you're really cutting yourself short. So set your bar higher, diversify your education and where you're getting your resources and your learning experience from. Back to testing methodology, Burp Suite Pro and OWASP Zap here worked really well. I have a Burp Pro license from work, so that's what I used. However, Zap is an incredible resource that's highly undervalued by this industry for some reason. I totally encourage you, if you do not have a Burp Pro license, and you really don't need to have one unless someone is paid for it for you, or you've done bug bounty hunting and you've been able to pay for it through those proceeds. I do not recommend going out and just spending $400 on a pro license, especially with things like Zap in place. So being as time was of the essence, I was trying to do this on a Sunday evening. I just threw Burp Suite Pro at it, again, only because I have it, and I was trying to go quickly. I could have used Zap if I wanted as well. Do know, though, that Burp Suite Pro and Zap are not necessary. You can manually fuzz and inject parameters into different locations on websites, search bars, parameter injections in URL links when you're doing get and post requests, etc. So by no means was Burp Pro or Zap a requirement here. It was only in the interest of time, trying to get this done as fast as I could. So in less than an hour, literally from kind of found my application, got it installed, to testing, I had found reflected cross-site scripting, multiple reflected cross-site scripting vulnerabilities and SQL injection vulnerabilities as well. SQL injection allowed for full access to the SQLite database, which ended up being a 9.8 CVSS later on when it was rated by NIST. And then the reflected XSS was like a 6.3, I think. Here you can see just a simple, I think that this is, in regards to the SQL injection, this was the parameter that broke the database, this ID apartmentee equals 01, and it was on this modifica app.php. This is an application developed in Italy, so as you can see, there's some Italian in there. But again, the application itself and its functionality is really good. Just small, one-person operation, builds this out, has, I think, 10 or 15 hotels who use it, and just doesn't have a whole lot of that security apparatus in place. So that's how we found the SQL injection. And then, here's just an example of a simple reflective cross-site scripting vulnerability in the application. Up here, you see I break the application logic with a simple double quote and then a closing bracket, and then just a straight unencoded JavaScript payload. Here is the outcome from the SQL injection using SQL Map, which is quite common. You guys hopefully have some experience with SQL Map. If not, there's SQL Map rooms on TryHackMe. There's information all over the place on how to use this. And one other resource we didn't touch on is Port Swigger Academy. If you're really interested in web application, head over there. So again, in exploitation time, in total, I think there was nearly 50 reflected cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. That's because all of these PHP pages were similar to one another. Oftentimes, developers will reuse pages as they build their application and then purpose them out for their intended purpose. So if you have injections points on one, it's very, very common to have injection points on many pages. Multiple input parameters are also vulnerable to SQL injection. And again, the total testing time, I think, was less than 2 hours. Here you can see one of those errors in the SQL request that was giving me an indication that this was, in fact, going to be vulnerable. And this is just an error-based SQL injection here. Yeah, the need for DevSecOps. And, this is something that needs to be rolled in more and more in the initial steps of our development processes. When we think about, the software development lifecycle, the SDLC, we really need to make that the SSDLC, the secure software development lifecycle. We need to roll in security premises immediately, get those conversations started up front, rather than once the application's hitting alpha stage and we need to start testing it. That's a chat for a whole different day, and for people who are on the security architecture side and um, and enjoy doing DevSecOps, et cetera. But do know that oftentimes when you're seeing web applications that are falling apart or having a lot of these issues, it could be because that secure part was not wrapped in early, and it's too much of a pain, or we'll just react to the issue later on um, before they wrap it into the process. So the CVE application process itself can be quite daunting. This is something that's not well laid out. There's one PowerPoint that I was able to find initially when I got my first CVE that was on the MITRE webpage, and it was hidden and not easy to find. There really is a little reference, which is why I wrote my original Medium article in August on this topic, which really garnered a lot of really good feedback, which is why I decided to take it on the con circuit a little bit. The first step in this process is to determine if the vulnerability is legitimate, which you've already determined as we saw in the previous steps. And then we need to see if the developer is a certified numbering authority or a CNA. We touched on that term a little bit ago in the chat. And a CNA, there's just shy of 200 of them listed with MITRE. They are approved to assign CVE IDs themselves. We're thinking organizations like WordPress, Windows, Apple, etc. They have their own security measures in place, their own security teams in place to assign or to inspect, assign, or deny. As we see, that's a very challenging and a very subjective process. There's vulnerabilities being listed all the time against like Microsoft Windows that they just won't touch. They've set their own vulnerability standards so cluelessly that things like UAC bypasses are no longer a vulnerability that is eligible for a CVE or eligible for security patching or addressing. And so we have this issue with CNAs where they really just get to make up their own rules, which is a whole different topic for a whole different day. And I would love to chat with anybody here who wants to get onto that topic at some point. But in short, we have to determine if the developer is a CNA or not. And we can do that through MITRE's website. There's a link that lists all of those CNAs. If the developer is a CNA, that CVE process has to go through their reporting process itself. If the developer is not a CNA, which the majority of developers in the world are not, because there's only 197 listed as CNAs currently, the process goes through MITRE. So this, the developer I had with for this article was not a CNA, so we'll be covering the process of going through MITRE directly. Do know that this process will be changing in the future a bit. They'll be using a CNA of last resort is what it's called. MITRE gets overwhelmed with handling these things, so I think they're going to contract with already listed CNAs, and they will be processing some of these requests instead. So after determining the developer is or is not a CNA, it's best practice to contact the developer directly about the vulnerability. We do this out of respect for the developer, but to also give them an opportunity and a chance to remedy the vulnerability before publicly releasing it. Again, we think about global scale and global impact of vulnerabilities. If you were to just find a vulnerability in Windows and decide to just dump that 0-day online, think about the huge implications that might have on security worldwide. And we need to think about what those implications are, big and small. So even though the application might have 5 different, small business users or a single small business user, that could affect that small, that single small business user, entire business landscape. It could crush them. It could take them out of business. If they manage, say $1 million in sales or $5,000 or $10,000 in sales, and now you've dumped the vulnerability that can dump that entire company's social security number database. The ramifications, both big and small, are huge, and we really want to give the developer the leeway to try to remedy that if they're willing to do so. Do know that it's not an absolute requirement. And use best judgment if the developer doesn't respond after a certain amount of time. I try to go with 72 hours. Keep in mind, if you file or if you contact them on like a Thursday or a Friday, they're humans, they're likely not working over the weekend. So, extend your timeout some more, but use your best judgment here. And here you can see a simple example of the initial email I sent to the Hotel Druid developer. just said that I conducted security testing on your application and found some critical ones. I'll be applying for CVE status and would like to know if you're willing to work with me on this. He, in fact, was. He even gave me an updated version of the web application to test after the fact, just to make sure that the vulnerabilities were fixed up. Do know that this will not be the response you get from everybody. Mitel was not willing to work with me whatsoever, so I just filed against it. I just filed the CVE. And that's because Mitel was managing a legacy application that they didn't want on there, that was just causing grief. So results may vary, but in the end, just use your best judgment with these folks and don't be afraid to file if they're not willing to work with you. In the end, the idea is to make a more secure infrastructure. And if they have to respond or react after the fact because of their unwillingness to work with you, then that's on them. So after trying to contact and work with the vendor, it's time to apply for your CVE itself at the link there at cveform.miter.org. The submitter needs a valid email, the number of vulnerabilities you're reporting, that you verified the vendor is not a registered CNA with MITRE, and that you've done your research and verified the vulnerability isn't already listed. You don't want to go through the pain that people do with bug bounty hunting and submit a dupe. Go through all that trouble to do all the paperwork, all the filing, and be able to research that it's already a duplication versus bug hunting where you don't know that it's a duplication because they don't tell anybody. Here you have the opportunity to do your research, do your due diligence to see if it actually does exist or not, and then give you the opportunity to make your case that it doesn't. So submitting it here, the form looks like this. We select the request type, which we're reporting the vulnerability. We enter our email address, the number of vulnerabilities to report, and then you're verifying down here at the checkboxes that it's not already a CNA covered product and that the CVE ID isn't issued for it. We then describe the vulnerability type, the product vendor, the product name, and the version of vulnerable software, which you see here is, this dropdown has different things. It's got cross-site scripting, it's got remote command execution, etc. The vendor of the product, and then the product name itself and the version number. Has the vendor confirmed? At the time that I sent this in, they had not confirmed yet, which is okay. It took them a little bit longer to get back to me. You can contact MITRE after the fact and let them know, hey, the vendor has contacted me, and they can update the finding after that. The attack type, the affected components, the vector. This is what the attack vector was, which again, for me, it was parameter tampering for the SQL injection. And then the suggested description of the vulnerability. This is what's going to be listed in the CVE itself. So make sure that whatever you want your CVE to say, this is what this box says, and then discover credits. The CVE database is public, and a CVE number will only be made public if the finding is as well. So when you file for your application, it's asking for your references for the CVE and for the finding. Do know that if you're trying to work with the developer, or you don't want to release the information until the CVE is made public, you can hide this in a private GitHub repo and just tell them in the additional information, I'll provide you the link once the ID is issued by MITRE. This is acceptable and it's a well-used practice within MITRE, so don't feel afraid to do this. And then eventually you'll receive an email back. There is no specific time that you're going to get contacted back by MITRE. They receive tens of thousands of reports a year, and they are overworked and quite honestly very underpaid. So it could take a few days, it could take a few weeks. I know people who have waited months. If you're waiting months, you might want to resend your request in. But I think these took 3 or 4 days. So you'll receive an email that tells you whether they're confirming the finding and issuing you a CVE ID. Or a denial email requesting more information. And here you'll see that it says reserved. If you were to go, before you make your reference public, if you were to go to that CVE ID number on MITRE, it's just going to say reserved, and that there's something reserved here that's not been made public yet. There are regularly vulnerabilities that are listed like this, where they're never made public. On the other hand, there are lots, as you can see, if you've ever done research, that are made public and that are listed for others to see. So they give you the CVE ID numbers, and then they say, please provide the valid public references. This is where we go to our GitHub page or our Medium article or whatever you're using, whether it's a website or a work blog, and you're going to make those references public at that point. And then you're going to respond to that email that you receive with your CVE ID numbers with the links to those public references. Super simple. If you're using a GitHub repo, you can just change the name of the repo to whatever that CVE ID number is, and then make it public rather than private as you had it before. MITRE will eventually make those findings public, and then NIST will also assess the findings and update resources with a CVSS score. This can take a while depending on NIST's workload. Again, the people doing this are also overworked and underpaid, so just be patient, but eventually those scores will come out. Note that MITRE does not attribute findings to an individual person. The individual is the owner of the reference used in the CVE ID in the vulnerability database, meaning the author name or the repo owner, etc. That is the owner of the CVE ID. MITRE does not care who found the vulnerability. They're simply there to maintain the database of the vulnerabilities themselves. So if you do find a CVE, it is on you to disclose that it was you. It is on you to maintain your reference, and it is on you to make sure that you attribute yourself to that finding and maintain it and protect it. If you delete that reference, there is no longer proof that that is your finding. So we've done all this work, and now we're to the point where we're going to try to leverage this work to help us hack that hiring process. And here you see, I've got a simple Twitter post, multiple reflected cross-site scripting, SQL injection, etc., and then a LinkedIn post. These are good first starts, but it depends on your network base and how far you reach, right? If you don't have a big Twitter following, if you don't communicate often or regularly on LinkedIn, or you don't use social media in general, these things aren't going to work. Alternatively, there are people who are known to file local press releases, contact their local media, TV stations, etc., and let them know that these things have been found. So don't be afraid to be creative with making some of these things public and known, but it is a good thing to try to leverage. It does draw attention. MITRE does post these things in feeds, saying that there was a vulnerability found. And then when you go to that MITRE listing, there are links to your public reference, and you click on that public reference, and then there's your face. So make sure that you're leveraging your findings for your own growth and for your own benefit. Make sure you update your LinkedIn biography and your resume, right? So here you see I've got some CVEs here. I've updated my resume after certifications. I've listed my CVEs on my certifications. And then here's a couple folks who just shared some stories with me on Discord. After putting CVE in my GitHub repo and put it on Twitter, I've had 3 people reach out to talk about a job. And then got 3 interviews because of it, accepted an offer this week, no OSCP or other certs, just prove themselves in technical assessments. And we're able to kind of get that foot in the door, so to speak. So a few closing thoughts. We all know how harrowing it is to try to break into this field. It is unfortunate, and it will be the demise of our field if we don't change anything. We cannot have the same mindset. We are some of the most technically proficient and smart people on the planet. We truly are. We think critically. It is all of our job is thinking critically constantly. We are security researchers. We are security practitioners. We are operators. But yet we cannot figure out that we cannot have the same baseline for everybody and expect to get anywhere. And do know that there is no one right pathway into this field. There are people who started at the help desk and they were fixing printers and they were, helping Mary Sue get a virus off her computer. And then, they've moved into pulling cables and doing network administration, or they were a systems administrator. And then they moved into a SOC, and eventually somebody gave them a chance to try pen testing or whatever it is. That is a very traditional way, and that's because this industry is still new and novel. And the people who are making security decisions today may very well have had to crawl up that totem pole, because that was the only path. One day somebody said, you've got to be the security guy now because we have to have this. And they had to grind their way through this process and build those TTPs that we have. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And we really need to open up as a field and make sure that when we're in that door, that we're propping it open for everybody else who's there. And for all of you who are here who have heard me talk before, you've heard that spiel multiple times. We need to find ways that set yourself apart from other applicants and peers. The CVE process is one of those ways, in my opinion. Do know that as CVEs become more saturated, if more and more people start doing this, you're going to have to find something else to set yourself apart as well. So keep in mind that everything we do to try to make ourselves stand out from our peers will eventually be relative to the amount of people who have also done that. And make yourself seen. Do whatever you have to do. Shout from the top of the mountains. Whatever you have to do to make sure that other people are seeing you. Make impactful connections on LinkedIn. Make impactful connections on Twitter. And by impactful, I mean talk to that person. Have something in common with that person. Don't follow these link up and connect with 1,000 people challenges. I think it's silly and it's meaningless. Connect with 25 or 30 people who you can have a meaningful connection with, and make sure that many of those people you're connecting with are impactful. These are people like Jax, for instance, who is a titan in this field. Make sure that you're connecting with people who have an impact, people that if they see you making an impact or making waves as well, are going to notice you. Be noticed, be seen. And truly, I can only speak from experience. A single LinkedIn message to Heath Adams in 2019 led to where I'm at today. And I kid you not, simply saying, thank you for what you're doing. Oh, by the way, I realized, I recognize that we grew up close to each other, was literally how I got started into this field. And you have no idea what some of those impacts may be. So make those impactful connections on the impact players. Socials, if you're not following me already, I'd appreciate it if you did. I'm Joe Helly on Twitter. LinkedIn link is there. My GitHub, I've got some neat things on there. Cybersec Padawan on Medium, and then my website is themayor.tech. That website has a lot of good resources. It's kind of where I store some of my notes and references that I use on a regular basis, and it continues to grow. So if you have any questions or you're looking for PowerView commands or PowerShell commands, you're looking to, how can I use Meterpreter? I've got, a lot of command line options on there, etc. Some videos and some other things. If you're interested in getting started with pen testing, if you go to YouTube and you search for PowerShell for pen testers, I've got a free course on there that shows you how to get started with hacking with PowerShell. Alternatively, again, movement, pivoting, and persistence course is on the TCM Academy. It's also on Udemy if you're interested. So with that, I would love to have any questions whatsoever that you might have and be able to just talk for a few minutes. You guys can ask me anything you would like, anything whatsoever. And if there's nothing, if I don't hear anything, then obviously I'm going to duck out. But I'm happy to stay here as long as anybody would like to chat. So thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. I found the OG Rockstar on Amazon. I'm so happy. Just noticed the OSCP pillow. People don't realize that's real. It truly is real. It's such a meme. I hate that certification. You're welcome, Jeremiah. Thank you for being here. And you're welcome, Matthew. Thanks again for being here as well. Yeah, the pillow is a real thing. I don't think people realize it. There you see the best bottle or jar of moonshine ever made up here next to a bottle of the American equivalent of Scotch whiskey. You're welcome, Genevieve. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate you stopping in and listening. Hopefully I didn't bore your ears off too much. And again, if you guys are interested in the written article on this, if you are like me and you do better with some written materials rather than videos, I do have the link there to the Medium article. If you get stuck with the paywall thing, or if you've used your Medium articles, contact me on Twitter or something, and I can get you a free pass for it. Or I think you can look at it in like a private browser. But if you like written materials more, please check that link out instead, and bookmark it or whatever. Any other questions, advice, anything I can help with? And again, anything is free. If you want to ask what color my grass is, I'm happy to tell you that it's green. What do you do for fun to find balance in your life? So I think that all of us struggle with that question, Jax, and obviously I'm no different. So balance is difficult, and it truly is. I got an Xbox back here that I've been playing a bit more than I typically was in the past, simply because I am struggling to find some of that balance. I'm trying to turn off the best I can, say, okay, it's dinner time, and from here until everybody's in bed, this is my family time. I'm going to spend time with them. It's not always the most accurate statements. Sometimes I do get caught up coming back to my computer. But I am trying to bit more video games. I am trying to bit more of spending time with the kids, or checking in with them, etc. Um, I'm very introverted though, so don't have a whole lot of like in-person or personal friends. So a lot of times fun is going to like Cedar Point with my wife, going to Cedar Point with the kids, etc. But balance is hard. I struggle with finding balance every day, and people need to know that that's okay. I mean, we all do it. So, what was something unexpected from when you started making your courses? That I wasn't shooting in 1080p on OBS. I was shooting on 720 and had to redo like 40 of the 50 videos. Um, so that was pretty unexpected. And it sucked. I didn't realize how much my jaws and my ears would hurt um, from talking so long with like a headset microphone or a regular microphone even. Um, I spent a lot of time though up front making sure that things worked as smoothly as possible. Just looking at other people's courses when they create them. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on the back end with like questions and stuff, because it can really become overwhelming quickly as your student base increases trying to answer all these questions. So um, the things that were unexpected was just technical issues with recording and sound, and really just having no idea what I was doing. But the things that were expected that I would recommend everybody do is make sure that you put in extra time up front on troubleshooting, pass your environment out or whatever it is to a few people to test, and to get their opinion. And don't be afraid to peer review it with other people that you look up to, or that you're that may know as much or more than you, and get things peer reviewed as well. Um, don't expect a whole lot of time. I mean, it's a very, very trying time. I mean, out of 5.5 hours of content, I probably spent 200 to 300 hours total on the course. That was from figuring out the exact. I mean, I had to write out full PowerShell scripts to build domain controller environments the way that I wanted. So that was all manual. I had to reach out to somebody. I mean, I blasted on Twitter, "Hey, I need somebody to help me write some GPOs because I have no idea what I'm doing." To write some GPOs for the domain. So probably 40 of those hours was literally just um, the initial scripts just to get things working, and then the troubleshooting process, and then another 40 hours or so going through the coursework as I wanted it to look in my head before I even started recording, and then recording again and recording again. Um, but yeah. Yeah, troubleshooting is huge. And, some things, what he's doing is highly technical, right? And one of the big challenges too, so like with MPMP, I make a huge, I don't want to call it a stink, but kind of a stink, that this is not beginner. You cannot just turn your computer on today and feel welcome or ready for this. I want you to feel welcome, but you should not feel ready for what you're about to do if you've never done this before, right? If you don't have like PEH level knowledge, or like INES PTP, or if you haven't spent considerable time on your own home lab, you should not feel ready to do the MPMP course. And I make that clear multiple times. Even then, though, there's going to be technical issues you're going to run up against. But what he's doing it's highly technical. Even technically proficient people are going to have issues, and some of those things are machine dependent, right? If you're using a Windows box that maybe you installed x64, and whatever your reverse engineering is x32. I don't know how it is because I haven't done this course, but there's so many environmental variables too that can really play into that. But if you're going to make a course, I highly recommend thinking about all of think like the person who's going to take the course. Don't think like the person who's created the course when you're testing it, and really think about all of those errors and issues you're going to have. Have you reached out to a company responsible disclosure to report a vulnerability in one of their apps, and how did it go? Yeah, that's what this whole thing is about. So again, I reached out to the creator of Hotel Druid to let him know that I had exploited his application, and asking if he would like to work with me to not only secure it, but also go through the CVE process? And he said yes. On the other hand, the first CVE I have, which was again against a Mitel application, one of their communications platforms, they were not open to talking to me about it whatsoever. They just, it was something that when they merged with, I don't know if it was Nortel or whatever the organization was prior to Mitel taking over, but they just were not interested in working on that application security anymore. It was legacy. They don't like that clients are still using it, etc. And I talked with them on the phone a couple times. It was challenging to get a hold of somebody in person, which was probably the hardest part. So most of these organizations don't have a phone number on their website that says, here's how you get a hold of our technical security team or our IT security team. They have a contact our North America office number, and you've got to go through this whole, press 1 for English, press 2 for, whatever. And then you're going through trying to figure out who the heck to talk to. And eventually I just told somebody, I found a security vulnerability in one of your applications, have somebody call me. And it took like a day or two for them to do that. And they were not interested in cooperating whatsoever. And again, they were saying it's a legacy application. It's just, whatever, we don't want to deal with this anymore. And I had talked to with a previous Mitel security engineer a couple months after that, and he said, yeah, it's just kind of the mentality of that team at this point. So your reception is going to be hit or miss, Steve, and don't be afraid to just say, if they don't want to work with me, I'm still going to go ahead and file this process. I'm still going to work on it. Just started maneuvering through your site. What types of positions or advice can you recommend for entry-level pen testing jobs? I don't think there's a clear way to get into the field going through the front door currently. So trying to network with other people that can get you an interview, that can get you, that'll fast track an application for you or put you in a side door, put you in touch with a decision maker, I think is probably the best solution currently. There's a huge disconnect, and nothing against folks who hold the CISSP, but you're not technically proficient at security practitioning anymore. You're looking more at middle to upper level management of security teams. And so when you see a company requiring like a CISSP for a pen testing job, but you want to work at that company for some reason, you really have to find a different way in. Don't be afraid to look at both boutique shops and very large organizations as well, but do a little bit of research. And by research, I don't mean looking at Glassdoor or Indeed and seeing what reviews are, because people giving reviews on those are pissed off ex-employees oftentimes who have nothing good to say no matter what you ask them. So this industry is large enough online. Just make sure that you're asking folks. The entry-level position, like you're saying, with 10 years experience, that's a clueless HR person who has no idea what they just copy and pasted from somebody else. So you don't need 10 years experience to be a pen tester. You don't. You do need some amount of knowledge and expertise, obviously, to be a pen tester. You do need to be trainable to be a pen tester at the entry-level position. But I think that with the appropriate amount of making an impact on folks, and I'm going to use Mike Padrick here, who's also known as Fearless online. He's openly failed OSCP several times, but he's streaming. He helps mentor folks. He's, busts his butt as hard as anybody I've ever known. And he kind of did like I did last year and just eventually said, what the hell's going on? Why won't anybody give me a chance? And you got some folks like Cyber Mentor, Josh Mason and some other people to just blast his name out and say, get this guy hired. And the interviews started happening. The people started contacting him saying, okay, this guy, might be able to cut it. What's going on with him? And he just got a job at the Federal Reserve Board. First job in IT. He was cleaning pools 3 weeks ago, owned his own pool cleaning business. And literally went from being a pool cleaner to a pen tester. So ignore the job level and the entry level positions and start making impacts on the right impactful people. To me, that is the best, fastest, and most efficient way to get into this field. It's also the most unfortunate way to have to do it right now. But you're up against everybody that looks just like you trying to bust through the HR process, or you can make an impact on a few people who can get you in the side. So hopefully that helps. Any other questions? Pool cleaner to pen tester? I think he's probably going to do something like that. I truly think that um, hopefully he pushes like an article or something, because I mean it reminds me of I wrote an article on ethical HackerNet like right after I got out of college. I had just finally decided what I was going to do. I wrote an article on EHNet that was from politician to pen tester, or from politician to pen testing, back in 2019. And um, Mike and I, Fearless, have a whole lot in common when it comes to these things. We have these completely irrelevant positions that we were in, and we've moved from literally this irrelevant to IT security job title to pen tester. And there's a lot of folks who do this, um, and it is possible. So really, that's just kind of the hope we have, is people see that it is possible. It comes with a ton of work. I would never ever wish what I did upon anybody. I mean, it was 50, 60, 70 hours a week busting my tail to get here. It shouldn't be that difficult, but um, make impacts, right, Jax? If you're still here, got to make impacts on the right impactful people. Any other questions, folks? I know we have some more great stuff coming up here with the cons. So love the pillow. Thanks. Yeah, it's I would never sleep on it. That's too try hard for me, but love the pillow. So, well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to wrap things up. I do appreciate you all hanging out here today and listening to me talk. Missing the Twitch streams, me too, Jeremiah. I just last note when it comes to that, streaming is hard work. What you see for the 1 hour, it was taking me a couple hours of prep time usually to do, but I was also creating write-ups and whatnot for a lot of those boxes I was streaming. My stream tempo was massively difficult, going 5 days a week. And just like anything else, it requires discipline. As you do it less and less, you find it harder to do it more and more again, right? So I've gone on to a few different ways of creating content, but I do miss the Twitch streams. It's just one of those things where, one part finding time, one part finding the discipline to continue doing it. And the motivation, it's hard to be motivated to do some of these things sometimes. So maybe someday I'll get back into streaming. I truly do miss it, and I'd like to do it again. So thank you all so much for being here. I truly do appreciate you listening. Hopefully you all learned something here today, and don't be a stranger, please. Come hang out, come chat, and I'll see you guys again soon. Till then, y'all take care. Have a great weekend, everyone.